2016 edition of City Connection. This is the live call-in program where you, citizens of Grand Rapids, can ask your mayor about local issues. City Connection is broadcasting live right now on Community Media Center's GRTV Livewire Channel 24 and streaming live at therapidian.org. To take part in the conversation, call 616-459-4881. Email as well, cityconnection@grcmc.org. And you can tweet to @GRTVaccess or GRTV's Facebook page. With Community Media Center, I'm Linda Galash. In the GRTV Livewire Channel 24 studio with me is Mayor Rosalind Bliss. Welcome to City Connection.
Thank you. Thank you.
Later in the show, we're going to have a guest, but you and I will talk first. We have Tracy Kaufman with the Essential Needs Task Force discussing housing and homelessness. You'll interview her a little bit later.
I will. And Tracy is, probably pretty well known in our community. She used to be at Home Repair Services doing prevention when individuals were where there was a concern about eviction. So she was doing a lot of eviction prevention work and has been with ENTF, I think going on 2 years now, but has been in the field of housing and homelessness for a long time.
Great. We'll get to your interview with her at about a quarter past the hour. Let's do some catch up on just some things Grand Rapids, and wanted to bring up just a few things. You mentioned last month that we'd be hitting budget time for the city of Grand Rapids right about now or very, very soon. I think about April as income tax month. The city's is due at the end of the month, but how much of the budget is dependent on income tax?
A significant portion of the budget is so if you look at it, let me give you a thumbnail sketch. So if you look at our general operating fund, we are at about 58% of our general fund revenues coming from income tax, which is significant. And then we get a small sliver from property tax, and then fees for service, so when people go in and they pay for something. And then the rest is from revenue sharing from the state. But over the years, that pot of money has gotten smaller and smaller. And so when you look at the pie, the income tax portion of the pie has grown year over year.
Okay, so have budget proceedings begun? Is it time for mentioning, public hearings yet?
Yeah, not yet. So April 26th, the city manager will present the full preliminary budget to the full commission. And then after that, we have budget sessions set up every single Tuesday, and they range from 2 hours to 5-hour sessions. And during that entire process, we'll be going in each day that we meet for the budget, we'll be taking a section of the budget and going through it and reviewing it and making recommended changes and really understanding what the city manager is proposing. We will likely have a public hearing at the end of May or early June, and then we have to pass a budget by the end of June for a July 1 start date. Under state law, we have to pass a balanced budget. And so usually in the month of June is where we have some pretty lengthy discussions about what we think needs to stay or go. And then if we want to add something in, we have to find out how we're going to pay for it. So that's usually most of that conversation will happen in June, where the end of April and all of May will really be spent delving into the details of the different departmental budgets.
Okay. Well, as you noted, it's the city manager's budget, but what things do we know are going to be a part of this next year's budget? Some planning that needs to be funded, that sort of thing?
So my hope, so how the city manager sets up the budget is he meets with each city commissioner and myself, the mayor, multiple times as he's getting ready to prepare his budget to be presented to the full commission and to the public. So some of the things that I have requested in this year's budget, I've requested funds to be put in there to start a neighborhood matching fund, and I know we talked a little bit about that at our last time together. I've asked for funds to be allocated to start a housing fund, at least to get it started so that we can look at having some funds set aside to assist with some of the work we want to do around affordable housing. I also would like to see some resources added to economic development department where we can focus on supporting neighborhood business districts as well as small businesses. A lot of feedback I've gotten from business owners is that it's really difficult to kind of work their way through the sometimes bureaucratic process at the city, and they don't feel very well supported. So I want to change that. And then there will be some funds hopefully to really redesign, but also to rethink our website. So there will likely, hopefully, be some dollars set aside for IT and really rethinking how we, what our digital footprint looks like. So those are some of the things you likely will see. I anticipate the police and fire budgets will grow a little bit. I haven't seen those budgets yet, but I know that we've made it really clear that public safety continues to be a top priority. And then our Parks Department will likely be similar to years past. I mean, we have the dedicated funds for the infrastructure investment, and then that will, our general fund support of the department should stay the same, if not grow a little bit.
Okay, so all of those, well, not the parks, but there's additions to the budget.
Yes.
What's the plan for handling those?
Well, we'll see. I mean, that's the part of the budget is, you know, the budget is presented, and typically what's passed isn't exactly what's presented. So that will be a conversation that we have around the commission table. And I know that, you know, from my past experience, very often there will be input from some commissioners, or there'll be recommended changes, and then hopefully by the end of May, though, we'll have a really solid sense of what we want to pass, and then we'll start getting feedback from the community.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned was additional IT money for the city's website, and
Yes.
I think you brought that up a little bit last time too, but one of the things that the city announced recently was some more transparency in the commission and board meetings part of the website. Is that already in place, or is that a definite addition that we'll be seeing?
Yeah, so I would say it's not, in my opinion, it's not where we want to be, but we're starting to make progress. So we've already started doing what we can to change certain website pages to make them more user-friendly, to have fillable forms you can fill out and submit right electronically through the department. So some of that has been happening. We just recently updated how people view the City Commission agendas and e-packets. So that was recently upgraded and is a lot easier to navigate. So we're doing a little bit piecemeal right now, but my hope is that we'll have a full-blown redesign of our website, and it'll be entirely more user-friendly. Okay. And that will include transparency, access to information. It'll be much more easy to get the information that you're looking for when you go to the city website.
Okay. Another area that you brought up, and it's on topic for today, was having to do with affordable housing. What would
Yes.
how would the funds be used? How would it assist that?
So from the housing strategy work group that happened last year and the plan that the City Commission passed in December of 2015, it talks about the start of a housing fund. And that fund could be used in a number of different ways. And the hope would be that you'd have a housing fund set up. So some other cities have this, or they call it a housing trust fund, where then the commission would decide how those funds would be utilized. So they could be used for rental assistance. They could be used for upgrading housing to keep it affordable. It could be to supplement rents so that it could fill the gap for rent. If someone can only afford $600 and they're paying $900, it could be a gap. It could be used to assist with development, to be gap fill for developments, and to say, okay, we want to add 4 affordable units to this new development, but we need funds to assist in doing that. So it could be used in a variety of ways, but that would be decided by the commission on how those dollars would be used. So my hope is to at least get some money in the budget, get it started, see if we can maybe leverage private dollars to build that fund up, and then take a look at what is the current need. And the nice thing about a housing fund is that you can adjust the priorities of that fund based on whatever the need is. So the hope is that you would have money set aside that isn't tied to some of these state and federal requirements that we have. So right now, the city gets money from the federal government through HUD or through MSHDA, and we're able to use those dollars. But those dollars, how you use them, it's very restrictive. So you have to follow the guidelines set out by the federal government or by the state government on how those dollars are used. So the intent with a housing fund is that you would have a pot of money where there's more flexibility to meet the current needs.
Okay. What else should we know about with what's going on with the city and other areas that we haven't mentioned so far?
Yeah, so we're moving forward. I know, I think it was 2 times ago that we were together, we talked about community and police relations. And so we are moving forward with full integration with body cams. So that should be completely done by now. So every officer should have a body camera that they're using while they're out. And then also we recently approved a contract to move forward with implicit bias training for our officers. And then right now we're looking at RFPs and doing some studies around collecting data on when police officers pull individuals over to see if there's any racial profiling. So we are moving forward on those recommendations. That came out of the community and police recommendations, the 12-point plan that the commission reviewed about a year ago now. 12 recommendations came out of that, and those 3 were all part of that. So we are moving forward. That was recent. Another really big announcement recently was that our fire department became accredited, and we are the only fire department in the state of Michigan that is an accredited department. So it's a significant accomplishment. There's only 216 fire departments throughout the entire world, internationally, who are accredited because the standards are very high and you have to meet very high level of standard to be accredited. Our fire department has been going through the process for about 18 months, the accreditation process, and then just last week it was announced that we received full accreditation. So that is very exciting. We are in the process of hiring a fire chief. So we finished taking applications. We're reviewing applications right now. That is an appointment made by our city manager, but we're hoping that we'll have a new fire chief within the next 2 months. And then we're also in the process of hiring a new city attorney. So for about a month, we accepted applications for that. That is an appointment by the city commission and the mayor. And we are in the process right now of vetting those applicants. And then we'll be having first round interviews for the city attorney position next week.
Okay, so a few changes going on right there.
There are.
Well, I just want to ask real quickly, because we'll move on to the next segment shortly, but there are only a very few appointments that come from the city commission itself, and this is one of them.
It is.
The attorney. Who else?
Yes. So with the city manager form of government, the city commission, you're right, we only appoint 4 individuals, and those are the only 4 individuals in the city that report to the full commission, and that is the city manager, the city attorney, city treasurer, and city clerk. And I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes people are really confused and they think that the fire chief and police chief report to the mayor, and that's just not the case. Both the fire chief and the police chief, they both report to the city manager.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up.
Yes.
Well, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, Tracy Kaufman with the Essential Needs Task Force will be talking with the mayor. We'll be right back after this break.
People know the Rapid as Grand Rapids' public transportation system. But there's more to the Rapid than buses on the street or the bus stops and shelters you see in your neighborhood. Last year, the Rapid provided almost 12 million rides. That's a big number. It's easy to forget that every ride is taken by a person with a story. Through our new educational campaign, we're providing glimpses into the lives of a few of our riders.
Running for Jenny is a community movement to support Safe Haven Ministries. This year marks the 5th annual Running for Jenny team. The tradition has grown year after year as family, friends, and community members unite and participate in the 5th Third Riverbank Run. We run to remember Jenny Herron. We also run to raise awareness and raise funds to stop domestic abuse. To celebrate 5 years of Running for Jenny, we are hoping to reach 500 members who will commit to walk or run at least 5 kilometers in the Riverbank Run as part of our 5 years, 5K, 500 Strong campaign. Running for Jenny kicks off with a celebration at Rockford Construction on Thursday, April 7. We've added a children's event called Camry's Butterfly Dash that is open to the community, and all kids are welcome to run in Camry's honor. Pledge sheets for kids to raise money for Safe Haven Ministries can be downloaded at runningforjenny.com. Help us stop domestic abuse by joining Team Running for Jenny. The last day to register is May 13. To join the team or learn more about our mission and Camry's Butterfly Dash, visit us at runningforjenny.com or find Running for Jenny on Facebook. By wearing our purple shirts and participating in the Riverbank Run with Running for Jenny, we can take a stand against domestic violence and honor Jenny Herron and all those who have lost their lives as a result of domestic abuse.
5, 4.
All right, well, thank you. Today I'm really excited to have with me Tracy Kaufman to talk about the Essential Needs Task Force. So as you know, for several months now, several. I technically am in my third. I've been mayor 3 months.
It feels like several months.
It feels like
already.
several months. But I've been talking a lot about housing and homelessness.
Right.
There was a meeting probably about a month ago now talking about the vision on homelessness and where we've been. So today I have with me Tracy Kaufman, and Tracy is the director of the Essential Needs Task Force, which falls under United Way. And I feel like a lot of people don't know about ENTF and the work that's being done or what that looks like. So I'm glad you're able to be here today and help shed some light on it for people who aren't familiar with it. So maybe first start off, share with us a little bit about you and your experience. I mentioned earlier that you used to be with Home Repair Services.
Right. That's where I grew up, is what I say.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I definitely appreciate the opportunity to bring people up to speed on the Essential Needs Task Force, or many people know it by its acronym, which is the ENTF. But yeah, so I came from Home Repair Services. My education is in social work, and I spent 13 years really starting and running their foreclosure prevention program. So a lot of my background is in housing, and we went through before the foreclosure crisis, had the program during the foreclosure crisis, and then as it was starting to wind down, the opportunity for the ENTF came up. Which really allowed me to look at not just housing, but other basic needs systems for our county. So I moved to this opportunity about 2 years ago. But the ENTF is great in the fact that it's a really established organization that's been around for 34 years. It's just always been staffed at part-time. And I was the first full-time staff they were able to bring on. And we have our own separate governance board. The United Way operates as our fiduciary because we do not have a separate 501. But they're one vote among 7 that sit on my governing board.
Nice. So for people who aren't familiar with
Yes.
ENTF or their history, why don't you talk about how its inception, how it started,
Yes.
how it's evolved over time, the city as a partner.
Absolutely. So the ENTF started in 1982, basically the last time this county saw a major economic crisis where revenue is down, so funds are tight, but yet your need for those essentials, those basic need that families have, increases. So the ENTF was formed out of the Department of Health and Human Services and began as a collaboration to help make sure that we were able to meet the basic needs of the citizens of Kent County. So there are 5 areas that we cover: housing, which is the coalition to end homelessness, and then we have energy, which is utilities, transportation, food and nutrition, and workforce development are the 5 basic needs systems that we cover and try to ensure that we are coordinating those services. But really, when I was brought on to not just have coordination, because that's kind of that basic level, but to really look at system alignment. How are we working together? How are we pushing ourselves and not saying, how many people did we serve, but have we changed anything? So it's that conversation of shifting from outputs to outcomes. And that's really what my job is to figure out, what are those outcome measures? How do we know that when we say we had 150 people come to this food pantry, how do we know that people are less hungry? You know, when we served this many people in housing, how do we know that we have less homelessness? And those are the measures that the ENTF is interested in. In addition to, and what I find really exciting, is the acknowledgement that here we have an organization that encompasses these 5 very different basic needs systems, where we have our individual experts in each one, but truthfully, they're all interconnected. You know, how do we really solve housing crises without addressing transportation, without addressing workforce and employment? Those things are so intertwined, and we have what I feel is a great structure to really bridge those conversation gaps that I think exist.
So let's talk about the structure, because I think that's where people get a little unclear.
Right.
So you have the Essential Needs Task Force, which has almost like a steering committee, and then under that you have these 5 areas.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about the structure and who sits around those tables and how is it set up?
So the ENTF has a governing board, and we have 7 organizations who sit around that. About 3 years ago, there was a more formalization of the governing of the ENTF. So the City of Grand Rapids, the City of Wyoming, the Salvation Army, United Way, Asset, and Department of Health and Human Services all sit around this table and are my governing board. That's who I report to. And then under that, we have the 5 committees of the ENTF in those 5 basic need areas that I just listed. And those tables are open to anybody. And my job is to really make sure they are all inclusive tables. How do we make sure that we have all of the players that need to be in each of those system conversations sitting at those tables every month. So we meet monthly. Each of those committees meet monthly. The Coalition to End Homelessness is a little more formalized because that coalition is federally mandated to exist per HUD. So there's actually another steering committee that's elected within the coalition as well. The City of Grand Rapids has a standing seat, though. They get their seat held and will always be on the steering committee for that one. But the other ones don't have that. They just have co-chairs under each of them. We also are partnering with an effort called K-Connect, which is a county-wide initiative for collective impact. And we operate as their basic needs subcommittee. So they look to us when they want basic need outcomes, basic need measures, and experts in the area of basic needs.
So K-Connect is a whole nother,
It's
probably
a whole other
longer conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's important work being done in our community.
It is, and it's all about alignment, right? We did not want, ENTF has been around for 34 years, K-Connect is newer. However, there is enough need and enough work to go around, and I think really what we need to do in this community is figure out how do we partner, not be threatened, but how do we partner and align our efforts? And that's really what we have chosen and are working very hard to do, is to make sure that the ENTF efforts are just reinforcing and aligning with K-Connect and using each other's strengths. And that's been a real benefit to both of us.
Yeah. So let's talk homelessness.
Okay.
So homelessness in our community, it's been a priority for a long time. In fact, I think I was maybe 3 or 4 months into my first term as city commissioner when the Vision on Homelessness was presented to the full commission. Right. My predecessor, Mayor Hartwell, was really actively engaged in that process of coming up with this vision on homelessness in our community. Cities all throughout the country are taking this on as a priority and committing resources to ending homelessness. So let's talk a little bit about what have we learned in the last 10 years? Where have we made progress? Where are we still struggling? And then where are we right now? How are we rethinking homelessness and maybe reprioritizing or even doing things differently now than maybe we were 10 years ago?
Well, one of the major shifts that we've had is really working hard to formalize the coalition, which really is the formal body that is working towards ending homelessness. How do we make sure that that feels like a representative voice and allows all of the agencies to come together and have a platform to work together? Because truthfully, there is not one organization on their own who's going to be able to end homelessness. This is going to take a community-wide effort. And how do we ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction? I mean, unless we're able to do that, then we're not going to be able to make the impact that we want to make. So I think there's been a lot of movement towards that. There's also been a shift with the Housing First model. It's a nationally proven model, and that is where the theory is you don't try to solve the crisis that caused the homelessness first, you provide housing first. Knowing that truly to have somebody be able to deal with the issues that may have led to the homelessness, be it work or whatever may have happened in their life, in order to address those, you have to know where you're going to sleep at night. You just have to have that foundational stability in your life. So what we've gone to is a Housing First model in this community, and we've allocated more resources to it. If you look at one of the tools that we utilize in Housing First, it's called rapid rehousing. And that's where the very first thing we do is we put you in housing. We get you housed, and then we help subsidize that housing. While you are assigned to a case manager, and that case manager helps to provide the assistance in the areas specifically within your need set. It's not preconditioned. It's not saying you have to do step A and step B. It's what do you need? What are the areas of assistance that are particular to you that are going to help you remain stably housed? And then as you're able to make progress in those areas, our assistance goes down and down until it's no longer needed.
Yeah, that's great. And there is a lot of data that supports Housing First models.
Absolutely.
And recently there's been a big push at the federal level around housing for veterans.
Yes.
And I know that our city signed up for
Signed
that
on.
and is very supportive
Absolutely.
of ending homelessness among vets. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
what our community is doing?
Great. In 2014, Mayor Hartwell signed on to First Lady Michelle Obama's call that mayors sign on. It was a mayoral challenge. And Grand Rapids stepped up and said, yes, we are going to do this. And right now, we are looking to be on pace to end veteran homelessness within the city of Grand Rapids by the end of this year. And we feel like we can do it. We started out our list back in 2014 with 292 veterans who we knew about who were homeless. About 40 more were added onto that list, but we've already housed over 117 of them. So we really feel like we have the resources and that we have the will and the ability to bring everybody to the table in order to coordinate the additional resources that are still needed to meet that challenge. And that's really a major focus of the coalition right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's such a great initiative, and there's a lot of energy, and I think it gives us something to build on. So we're just about finished up with this segment, but I just want to add at the end, if individuals are looking to find more information out about ENTF, where would you direct them to?
I would direct them to our website, which is going to launch in about 2 weeks.
Oh,
I
good.
promise. There is the website right now is currently hosted by the county, and it just hasn't been updated. And instead of trying to work within a very structured framework that was difficult, we went and we've created a whole new one, and it's www.entfkent.org.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Tracy, for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Mayor Bliss. I'm Elizabeth Rogers-Driard. I'm the Place Matters Content Coordinator at the Rapidian. Affordable housing was a huge issue at the recent Neighborhood Summit. There's concern Grand Rapids is on the edge of a housing crisis for both middle and lower incomes. How is a housing subcommittee going to reach its goals for ending homelessness when even middle income and working class citizens are struggling to find it?
What's happening right now?
And we're back. Sorry.
Okay, well, welcome back to City Connection, and Mayor Bliss with Tracy Kaufman. Great conversation there, and a few more questions will be coming up on topic, including the one from the Rapidian right there. I guess, Mayor, that was somewhat directed to you, but you can include Tracy in that response.
Yeah, thank you for that. You're absolutely right. So, so last month we had our neighborhood summit. In fact, I just saw the preliminary feedback from that. And affordable housing is a core issue in our community. We've known that for some time. So last year we had this whole process called the housing strategies, where we are looking at what are some options that we have as a public entity to try to impact affordable housing. And you know, there are some things that we can do. We're actually looking at that more closely right now. How can the city take a look at our incentives? How can we rethink our policies when it comes to development? You know, some of that we won't be able to impact because it's driven by private developers and what they choose to do. And you know, during when they develop, you know, a 10-story building, they can make a decision about is that market rate, is it affordable? We have been working with developers to do mixed income projects, and we're starting to see some of those as we put more and more priority on that. We have a number of developers who are going to the state and requesting low-income tax credits so that they can do projects where it's a mixed income. But it's a huge issue right now, and we know that. We're hearing that from neighbors, and the homelessness piece is a piece of it. So we can't, you know, when I think about ENTF, what I appreciate about ENTF is that it has a holistic approach, and with the subcommittees under ENTF, you have groups working on transportation and employment and workforce and food and utilities, and in addition to homelessness. And so we've actually had conversations about how do you really build in this larger conversation about affordable housing under the structure of ENTF, or at least make sure that the conversations we're having at the city level are tied into the work being done at ENTF. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would just add that it's all connected, right? I mean, we have tools that are being discussed within the city about how to encourage more affordable housing, but at the same time you can't ignore the fact that the affordableness of housing is impacted not just by your rent cost, not just by your mortgage amount. It's impacted by your transportation cost. It's impacted by the wages you make.
Childcare.
Yeah, childcare, exactly. There's other ways that housing can become affordable or unaffordable. And I think those are additional conversations that need to be incorporated into not only just what the rent payment may be.
Okay. You know, you gave some, you talked a little bit about measurables and really seeing if there is some success in the efforts that are going on, and gave some very specific numbers when you're talking about veterans and the success there. What are some of the other measurables? That question indicated on the verge of a housing crisis, but you're also measuring, you know, essential needs and a lot of other
Absolutely.
things.
Well, it's great that you asked that, because we just entered into a contract with the Social Research Institute out of Kelvin. So when I came on, you know, just about 2 years ago, we didn't have good outcome measures, like hard numbers. So all of the committees went through a big process to set their outcome goals, right? So what do we want to achieve? What do we want to look at as for an outcome in the areas of transportation, in the areas of energy and food? And those have been set. And now it is asking the question, what are we going to measure? So we're bringing on Kelvin, because that really takes, you need those researchers, because I want to make sure that we have data points and data sets that are replicable, that can be disaggregated, because disaggregation is really important when you're talking about equity. Numbers on a whole can be deceiving, but when you break them down and disaggregate them by different categories, they can tell different stories. And I want to make sure that we are using data sets that we're able to tell the whole story. And being very sensitive to that. So they are coming on as of April 1st, and they'll be working with us through September 30 to set those measures. But we're looking at things like the Food and Nutrition Coalition committee under the ENTF. We found that we just didn't have good numbers for how we were measuring food insecurity in this town. So we have researched the USDA questions, we've researched questions utilized out of MSU, and we've combined them. And we've chosen 5, and those are being added on to Voices GR this year, and they'll also be added on next year to the Kent County's countywide health needs assessment. And we will begin inputting that data as soon as those surveys go out to really measure food insecurity for our county specifically.
The data seems so critical, because you can throw a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort towards something and not know if you've made any ground. The story of the veterans, the homeless veterans, is kind of amazing. Can you take us through that whole process and how you've come to this level of success?
Well, it's really through collaboration and partnership. You know, this was a national call, and it started with a partnership at the federal level. This wouldn't be possible if the VA and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, weren't working together. That's one where it started, because that aligned resources. And then those resources were able to be allocated here. We have a key partner who's leading the charge, Community Rebuilders, in this community, but they're working in partnership with the coalition, and they're working in partnership with all other organizations, because they can't do it on their own either, and they know that. So that's really where it began, is at the federal level, has then able to come down to the local level, and then through an existing structure under the coalition, we're able to bring about that collaboration, so where we can pull resources that other agencies may have and prioritize them for veterans. And that's really what it takes.
And Tracy, I don't know the answer to this, but our commitment to veterans, I think, was also seen with the countywide millage that was passed for vets. And I know that that has provided some additional resources to support veterans in our community. And that really speaks, I think, volumes about our community and the people and how much they really appreciate veterans.
Absolutely.
So what do you do next to make sure there's not a sort of a slide in that situation, that it's not considered done at some point, and then, well, we're not necessarily watching or looking any longer, that it resurfaces?
And well, that's where the data comes in, right?
Okay.
It's a constant monitoring of the data, and it's a constant check. You know, how do we hold ourselves accountable to the numbers, and how do we put those numbers out publicly so the public can hold us accountable? And that's because that's really what it comes down to as well, is it's not just holding ourselves accountable, but it's having the public see these numbers, see this data, and be able to say, hey, why is this number going up? Why isn't it coming down? And for us to have real conversations, because we face a reality where we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough resources for everyone. So how do we make some hard prioritizations and some hard choices and figure out how to best allocate the funding we have? And again, it's when we want to make sure that the veterans stay at our functional zero, is what we call it. It is all about monitoring that data and keeping it in the forefront of their mind. And that's why the steering committee of the coalition is what they regularly do, is take a look at those numbers.
Now, the Essential Needs Task Force has a countywide scope?
Absolutely, yes, we do.
So when you speak about disaggregation, I imagine the situations are so different in different parts of the county. And talk a little bit about where
It is.
are some hot spots for particular types of issues that have some focus.
Well, you know, we have our representatives from Lowell and from Northern Kent County, and they come to us, and they have such a huge barrier when it comes to transportation. It is such a dramatic need. I mean, we have employment that is clustered, you know, in some of our more urban areas, and for them to be able to get to those jobs is exceptionally difficult. And then housing, it becomes another big need. If you live in Cedar Springs and you lose your housing, your options to be rehoused within Cedar Springs are much more limited than if you were down here. And those just become different conversations, and they are different needs. And that's why it's so important for us to have the voices of the experts from the agencies who work in those communities to participate in the NTF, and they do. And we so appreciate their voices and really make an effort to try to ensure that when we talk about concerns, that we are talking holistically as well.
Okay. You
There's
said
a,
you had a few additional questions, so I do want to let you take over at this point.
Well, thank you. I actually was just going to add on and actually ask Tracy to elaborate a little bit on this. So I have always been a big supporter of ENTF and the work that they do in all of the different 5 areas. But one in particular that I'm really impressed with lately is their ENTF partnering with individuals to look at what the needs are. And there's potentially a pilot project coming on in Walker as we talk about transportation and these clusters where you have high employment and little access through public transit. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
It's a really exciting pilot in my opinion, and you know, I'm aware of all the work that's gone into getting us to where we are today.
Yes, it's a lot of work because it's a lot of conversations, right, and a lot of effort. But what we're seeing is we have some areas where we have clustered employment outside of a regular running mainline bus. So an example that Rosalind's talking about is Walker. They have this 3-mile corridor where you have over 11,000 jobs, and they expect that to grow to about 25,000 jobs. So you've got Meyer and Custom Profile and Bissell, major employers out there who actually came to us and said, we cannot hire. We are hiring people, and then when they go to start, they find out that they can't get to us. So that negates a conversation that has to happen where we look at transportation differently. It's not, a mainline bus isn't going to be functional out there. That's not going to be the solution. So what do we do? And we've had great conversations with the Rapid, we've had great conversations with Hope Network to say, okay, what if we can have all these employers join together and say, I have 1 employee, I have 2 employees, I have 3 employees, so that we get a cluster of employees who all need transportation to these jobs. And if we're able to then cluster their pickup, then we can arrange pickups and drop-offs just around shift change times. Not a mainline bus that's got to run every half hour, every 40 minutes, but if you just schedule around where they live and those shift change times, then you reduce the cost and you meet that need in a more unique, on-demand way rather than a mainline bus, which would be hundreds of thousands of dollars that we just aren't going to be able to do, and it wouldn't serve a purpose. It would be running empty. So those are the kind of the unique conversations and thought process that we're going to need to have as we have employers, large employers, building out of urban areas and still need transportation to have their workforce.
And we're seeing some of that in the city as well. In fact, right now we're in the process of looking at changing Route 19 and having that run out to Oak Industrial. Same thing. You have this cluster of employers out there, and you have individuals who need access to public transit to get to those jobs, and they need them during these peak times when the shifts are changing. So again, that's why it's so important that we don't look at transportation and employment or housing all in isolation. That it has to be this holistic approach if we're truly going to impact the systems and make them better for everyone.
And I think bring in players who normally aren't at the table. The employers. These employers are at the table here and are willing to flex some of their shift times to align because they're all different. But if we can get them to align some of their shift times, then again, the conversation evolves and becomes much more of a solution-oriented one.
Okay, this is really unfair because we have less than a minute,
Oh,
but this question came from a viewer by Twitter, and it says, is homelessness solvable? So in about 30 seconds.
You know, I am an eternal optimist, and I could not do this job every day if I did not wholeheartedly believe that that answer is yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, it is absolutely. I mean, I just could not be here. I mean, and I think if we are to sit here and to say that we can't do this in this city, in this county, then no, we can. We have the resources, we have the ability. It's just about figuring out how we work together and how we absolutely put those pieces together, but we can do it. Absolutely,
Excellent.
we can.
Well, thanks for joining us, Tracy Kaufman with Essential Needs Task Force, visiting with Mayor Bliss. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to City Connection with Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss. This is when we take your questions about any subject. We were specifically talking about housing and homelessness right before this, but now we've got a few questions that are kind of general. Mayor Bliss, this first one comes from Ashley, and it says, does Grand Rapids have any reason to fear a contaminated water issue similar to the one in Flint? Are there any city services available to have my water tested?
Yes, that's a great question. So we actually just last week put out another report on our water quality, and you can find that on the city's website. It's actually right on the front page. If you scroll down, it's about halfway down, and you can read, you can have access to more information very specific about our water quality. So that's at www.grcity.us. We do regularly test our water. And we test actually for a number of metals and leads and contaminants. All of that is in that report. Our water quality, we are very fortunate. We have high water quality. Some of the concerns we see around lead, when you look at the specifics of Flint, which is a horrible tragedy, but in Flint, they did not use an anti-corrosive agent, and we have long used that agent. So we have a lot of regular upkeep of our underground utilities, and so I would say that we do not have concerns about the water quality in our city. If you are concerned about your water quality, you can call the city. You can call 311, and you can request to have your water tested. Actually, the Kent County Health Department is also providing testing, and I believe on our website that information is on there as well. You know, there's always concern when we're going in and doing construction projects, when we're taking out lead pipes and replacing them. And the city will notify residents. There was actually a neighborhood meeting recently in a neighborhood where we're going to be doing construction this construction season. So the city, if there are lead pipes, we will replace, when we're going through and doing replacement of pipes, we will replace up to the line. So if you look at property line, so if you look at anything in the right of way belongs to us, Anything on the private property belongs to the homeowner. But we notify homeowners, and homeowners at that time can also choose to replace their pipe while we're doing the construction. And if they can't afford it, the city will do a 10-year payment plan with them at a low interest. We actually, at our last city commission meeting, we changed the interest rate. It used to be closer to 7 to 8%, and we lowered it down. And so individuals can pay for that improvement, over 10 years through the city, and we would bill them annually for that repair, that replacement of the pipe. So that's always an option. There have been some studies that have come out about concerns like when the pipes are being changed out. And again, all that information is available through our water department to provide that information to homeowners as we do that work. So I would say, no, if you're worried about it, please get a test. You can call the city or call the health department to do that.
And just to clarify, so if the city is going through replacing lead pipes, notices that the juncture going to the house also has a lead pipe, you'll notify?
The owner will be notified,
Okay.
and they will be given information on how to replace that and the cost.
And possibly at a reduced cost since there's already pipes being torn up
Yeah.
at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just
It kind of depends on how far your house is back and how, I don't want to say it's exactly this amount because it really is dependent on your lot and your line and all of that.
So just tell us, this, we were talking about Flint, and it was more of a lead and a pipe situation. City of Grand Rapids gets its water from Lake
Michigan.
Okay.
Yes, and so you're absolutely right. So we get our water from Lake Michigan. We have a large Lake Michigan filtration plant out, on Lake Michigan Drive, going out to the lake. It's a huge plant. That's where a lot of the water is processed. Then we also have the wastewater treatment facility down here on Market Street. But we have an exceptional system. I mean, we've been doing this. We've been providing water to households for a long time. We have a really good system. We have a lot of partners, so we provide water to a lot of our partner communities. And so we work really closely with them. We have an advisory board that oversees upgrades and any changes in policies or practices. We have a pretty robust, not just system, but I would say oversight process in place for water in our city. And when you think about lead poisoning, I've had multiple conversations with Paul Hahn from Healthy Homes recently, and we have children in our community who are poisoned by lead. In fact, a report recently came out, and we actually had an increase in the number of children who tested positive for lead in our community. But the bulk of those children are being poisoned by lead paint in their homes still. And so it's not from the lead pipes. So we still have a significant problem with lead poisoning in our community. And unfortunately, it's concentrated in some of our poorest neighborhoods where you have really old housing stock, and they still have lead paint, hazardous lead paint that children are being exposed to. So I don't want to pretend that lead poisoning is not still a problem. It is a problem, and I want people to be concerned about it. And I think the tragedy in Flint has elevated the conversation about lead poisoning, and I think people are more aware of the damage that it can cause to children's brains. So I've said this for a long time. I've actually, for a long time, been active in the area around preventing lead poisoning of children. But if you are concerned, you should have your child tested. So it's really important that children get a blood test. And just not too long ago, Medicaid started paying for that test. But if you're concerned, you have children in the home, you live in an old home that has old paint, I really encourage you to take a look at your home and make sure that there aren't any lead hazards in your home. And there's resources through Healthy Homes Coalition. And so I really encourage families to reach out to them if they have any questions, any concerns whatsoever. And then the health department, they are really great partners in that work as well.
Okay, very thorough answer on that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next question is a little bit different, and it relates to April Fools. So let's look at this. It says there was a GR subway map made by Todd Fenton. that recently surfaced as an April Fool's joke under the title "Rosalind Bliss unveils plans for Grand Rapids subway system." While it's obviously not a real story, it did bring up a question. What are Grand Rapids' short-term and long-term plans for large-scale mass transportation systems like a monorail, a trolley, or even something like a subway?
That's hilarious. I didn't see that. I can't believe I missed that somehow.
You're not Googling your name
Although
enough.
I'm not, and I have been under the weather a little bit, so I'm just getting over a terrible cold. So I may have missed it because I think I was in bed by, early on April Fool's trying to get rid of this. So transportation, no, I am not aware of any subway plan, but let's talk about transportation because transportation is so critical. So we are looking at a couple things. So one thing that we are looking at exploring right now is redesigning the Dash downtown and having that system include a circular system throughout the downtown. So that is being looked at right now. How can we, we don't have the money to invest in a designated trolley system. I mean, there was some work done on that about 2 years ago, and the price tag came back pretty significant for a very small mile and a half. It was really expensive, and so it just didn't make sense feasibly. It doesn't make sense to spend that much money. But so from that discussion though came other discussions around, okay, if we can't do that, we can't afford that, what can we do? So we are looking at redoing the Dash. We are still looking at a robust bike share program. We are looking at the Rapid. We're looking at some of these routes and can those be adjusted or changed. Soon we'll be moving forward with the Laker line. So there was about maybe just 3 weeks ago, there was an allocation from the federal government for the Laker line. So we had been working on that for a long time.
And that will run from where to where?
Yeah, so that will be similar to the BRT on Division, but it'll run all the way from Allendale down Lake Michigan, over down Fulton, and then it'll come across Monroe and then come up Michigan. And so that will be a fixed route, Laker line, and there will be stops along the way. And so then we would have the Silver line coming from Division area, Laker line coming from Allendale area, but of course anyone living within that stretch would be able to utilize the Laker line. There are discussions about, is there a way to do a BRT going north? I think that's still several years out. But part of the process at the Rapid is always to look at the current routes. There has been discussion about increasing the frequency of routes where you have a high ridership. There's also been discussions about adding time on the end of the day and extending the hours later into the evening. That's been a request that we've had from employers, particularly for employers that employ individuals who are working second shift. They're having trouble, they may be able to take transit to work, but they don't have access to take transit back home after work. So we're looking at that. There's been requests to change the hours and frequency on the weekends to make it more available. So those conversations continue to happen. But I would say when it comes to downtown, probably the thing that will have the greatest impact is probably the rerouting of the Dash, where that would be circular and people would be able to pick it up and get dropped off.
Okay, so news on transportation, but it won't be underground?
It won't be underground, no. In fact, it's interesting when you look at even some of the places downtown especially, it's really hard to go underground or to go very deep just because of the water table and then also the soils, and it's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, interesting question, the way that one came through. Here comes one from Shanna, and it's, we'll take this as our final one. It said, what's your take on the standing ovation Governor Snyder got from the Economics Club speech in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, that one's hard for me to answer because I wasn't there. I've had a couple people ask me if I was there and to give, my sense of it, but without being there, not hearing what he was talking about, or questions he was answering, I just think it's really hard for me to pass judgment and to say.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So as a way of closing out, we've got about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the next City Commission meeting is next week, next
It
Tuesday.
is.
What are some of the things that citizens should know about that are on that agenda?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I haven't seen the agenda yet.
Okay.
So agendas come out typically on Thursday morning.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what will be on the agenda, but what I can share is that, as we talked about earlier, we will be preparing for the budget. So there will be, in April, we'll start talking about the budget. We'll have the budget out there. My hope is that typically the budget is a really lengthy, I think last year was like 300 and some pages. But the very first section of it is what's called an executive summary. And in that executive summary, it breaks down all of the recommendations. And so I will get that out to the community as soon as it is made available so that people can start to look through that and provide feedback and input as we start to embark on the budget process.
And you said that meeting, that will be presented to the commission the following meeting.
Right,
on the
yeah, April
27th.
26th. And then also on the 26th, so we will have a presentation on all of the feedback that we received from the Neighborhood Summit. So Stacy Stout is going to be at our April 26th meeting, and she'll be presenting all of the feedback and the data that has been collected and broken down, and she'll be talking about the top 5 priorities that came from the Neighborhood Summit.
Okay, and Stacy Stout was your guest last month.
She
We do
was.
have that show archived if anybody wants to know a little bit about that. If she was brand new out of the summit at that point, so it's going to be great to hear what the distilled takeaways from that were.
Yes,
Well,
indeed. And sorry for my cough.
You
hopefully I'll
muscled through?
feel
You did
I'll feel
fine.
better next time.
Great. Well, this is City Connection on GRTV's Livewire Channel 24 with Mayor Rosalind Bliss. I'm Linda Galash. And again, these are the first Mondays of the month here on GRTV. Mayor Bliss will be back in March.
May.
Silly, in May.
Yes. And then we'll talk more about the budget.
Sounds great.
Okay.
And I'm sure that it'll be exciting.
Yes. Thank you.
GRTV Livewire here.